Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, let me just say thank you to my colleagues, Representative Jones and McGovern, and to all of the members today in calling for a real debate on the war in Afghanistan, which really should have occurred when it was authorized in 2001, which of course I could not support then, knowing it was a blank check. Yes, it was an overly broad resolution for war without end. And so I have to thank my colleagues today for their leadership in calling for a safe and swift end to this war in Afghanistan. We all know the simple truth. There is no military solution in Afghanistan. Earlier this summer, we passed the sad milestone of 2,000 American lives lost in Afghanistan. Tens of thousands suffer more from wounds, both visible and invisible. And as we remember and honor our dead and our wounded and pray for their families and their loved ones, we also have the duty and responsibility and opportunity to act today to ensure that further losses are avoided and that we accelerate the transition to Afghans ruling Afghanistan. Later on today, I'm going to introduce an amendment to this defense appropriations bill to limit funding in Afghanistan to the responsible and safe withdrawal of troops. We have the power of the purse strings in this House, and for those who believe enough is enough, we should vote for this amendment. I encourage all of my colleagues to support the Lee Amendment, which will save at least $21 billion. And most importantly, though, the lives of countless Americans and Afghans. And quite frankly, as has been said earlier, it's time to use these tax dollars to create jobs here at home. It is time to rebuild America and also to provide for the economic security of our brave troops. They have done a tremendous job. They have done everything we have asked them to do. They have carried a tremendous load over the past decade of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Asking them to stay in Afghanistan 2 more years when there is no indication that circumstances on the ground will change, this is really unconscionable. Before we send our men and women in uniform into Afghanistan or ask them to stay for another 2 years, we have an obligation to answer simple questions like, what national security interests does the United States currently have in Afghanistan? To what extent does the United States' presence in Afghanistan destabilize the country by antagonizing local Afghans? How critical is the overall effort in Afghanistan compared to other priorities in our own country? Earlier this year, along with my colleagues, Congressman Walter Jones and Congresswoman Woolsey and McGovern, we held a hearing on Afghanistan with Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. This was an ad hoc hearing, mind you, because we should have had the authority to hold that hearing in the House Armed Services Committee or the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, but quite frankly, the leadership would not let us have a formal hearing. So we had our own. We had an ad hoc hearing with this brave, outspoken whistleblower, Colonel Daniel Davis, who risked his career to tell the truth about what he saw on the ground in Afghanistan. It was a hearing that every member of Congress should have heard before voting to spend tens of billions of dollars and risking the lives and limbs of tens of thousands of Americans in uniform. Those of you who attended the hearing or read the witnesses' testimony understand that the current strategy of propping up a corrupt regime in Afghanistan will almost fail. But instead of having a full debate on the current strategy in Afghanistan, instead of having a real debate about what we hope to gain with more years in Afghanistan, we are limited to these brief opportunities on the floor to remind Congress that the American people overwhelmingly want to bring the war in Afghanistan to an end. People are war weary and want this over. This Congress has the opportunity, once again, to stand with 7 out of 10 Americans who want to bring the war in Afghanistan to an end by voting yes on several of the amendments that we're going to be considering. My amendment that I will introduce later in this debate will limit the funding to the responsible and safe and orderly withdrawal of United States troops and contractors from Afghanistan. Madam Chair, let me thank once again our colleagues, Congressman McGovern and Jones, for gathering us here this afternoon. We have very limited opportunities, really, to reflect the majority of the American people's sentiment in terms of their weariness of this war. It's time to end it.
Gentlelady's time expired.